Hi, I'm Dr. Navina Jafa, a cultural technocrat, vice president of Center for New Perspective, and a committee member of the DLC CSR Committee, Delhi chapter. Today's story of the DLC talk is on heritage tourism, cultural skill mapping, and heritage walks. Let's go. The idea of incredible India, as I call it, India is an experience of organized chaos. So, what is heritage tourism? You cannot understand heritage tourism till you understand heritage itself. Heritage is just not monuments. Heritage are responses of human communities to their geographies. It could be a desert, a river, a forest, a plain, an ocean, and how over time immemorial, human communities have organized themselves as groups, exploited their resources, built a life for themselves, manifested in them, in their experiences, their knowledge skills, and produced all kinds of things which are tangible: buildings, books, crafts. So, the process of making a craft is the intangible heritage. The process or the actual manifestation of those skills is the tangible. So, when we are looking at a monument, the monument is not only about which king and what, it is a whole consortium of the heritage skills and knowledge that has gone into making that building. And so, the ownership of the heritage landscape is not only about the monument, it's about an entire landscape where a lot of communities live. And how they perceive that monument, their whole dynamics of the changes. So that any monument doesn't really have one single life, it has many lives. And usually we like to pick on one thread, one life. So when you go into a heritage landscape to look at the exotica, which is something different to you, which is mysterious, and you want to discover that, and that you tour to that, the person like me, who's a study leader who curates that experience for you, I need to have content which will be so distinct, and that content comes from not only studying history or geographies, it actually comes from something very special. It's called Cultural Heritage Skill Mapping. Because everything that you see is about those heritage knowledge skills. Now, that's the difference. That's the way we see the new way of heritage showcasing and heritage discourses. Heritage skill mapping is what I've developed over time, is all about longitudes, latitudes, zoning, and then creating different ways that you code human responses, which you link to codings and artificial intelligences of how that data can be used. And so the governments or the corporate can use the data and factor it into something called, we all are engaged with, environmentalism, sustainable development. How do we do that? Well, suppose a government or a corporation goes to make an investment in Uzbekistan, and there is a lot of resistance to that external mission. So if you have the data of cultural heritage skills, people like me will provide you innovative, inventive ways that you can start CSR projects. CSR projects that can also add to your not only goodwill amongst the grassroots community, but also add perhaps to giving you a new way of starting yet another economic activity where the local communities are not only dependent on that one investment you're making, maybe a factory or a gas pipeline or something, but you are also letting them participate in other kind of ways where you can make your money as well. So this is what cultural heritage skill mapping. The other way cultural heritage skill mapping And how does heritage tourism get connected? Because heritage tourism then becomes a modality of hands on experiences. No kind of virtual interaction on Zoom, on documentary films, etc., can give you that experience until you go into the ecology itself. And when you have a template of heritage skills, then you can actually also think of knowledge networks with creative communities. And especially those communities who are hands on with regard to climates and like the pastorals, for instance. They are wonderful, or even the maritime people who have great knowledge on the oceans and the seas. Bring them into the discourses and have a cultural knowledge network to augment your economic engagement. Now, I have been doing curating and taking people all around India and some parts of South Asia with all this knowledge content. And I've had the opportunity of presenting India and South Asia not only to little children, introducing them to multidisciplinary learning, college groups, academics, corporates like Siemens, Citibank, and so on and so forth, Tatas, but also to world leaders, which includes Benazir Bhutto, the Prince and Princess of Liechtenstein, Condoleezza Rice, Dr. Henry Kissinger, and many, many, many more. The universal thing was that when I did take them for these immersive experiences on hands-on understanding of India, they said, we wish that we had known India like this. This was what Dr. Kissinger said while riding with me on a rickety cycle rickshaw in Old Delhi, and I ending up with giving him street food. I think the most memorable incident I have is with the former Prime Minister of Pakistan, Benazir Bhutto. Let me tell you, she was so much more beautiful than what her pictures said. She was so striking. But when I met her, she was still in exile in Dubai. And she very much wanted to go and see the hospice, the monastery, Sufi monastery called Hazrat Nizamuddin. She was part of the Hindustan Times Leadership Conclave. And I was very nervous. What do I tell a person who's already in Sufism? Her family was visiting that place. What is it? When I did my research, the head priest of that dargah or the monastery told me that he had a letter which her father, Bhutto, had written a couple of days before he was hanged. And he would like to give her that letter. The only condition, he said, that you need to bring her to my house because I belong to the spiritual world and we don't go to meet people in the temporal world, power. You have to bring her to my house. He lived behind the monastery and there was an entry to the monastery. When I changed the route, Benazir became very nervous. So we had to let go of that and go back on the traditional route. When we entered the monastery, she said her prayers. And the person who entertained her, another priest, she kept asking, when will she return to Pakistan and when will she wear the crown? The man who was very much into stargazing prophesied 3 years from that day and 5 days. And so she did return 3 years later. And I quickly, excitedly called up the priest and said, well, your prophecy has come correct. And he said, really? I don't think so. When she arrived, she touched the floor and she looked up. Her home is there. 5 days later, she was assassinated and he called up to say she's reached her home. Goosepimples, isn't it? So, both as a curator, as a presenter, you present these multi-layers of India. And what is interesting is the various ways that you bring in untold stories of people on the margin. For instance, these days, I am doing for the Ministry of Tourism a very important program of launching pastoral tourism in India. And as a pilot, I'm working on camels India is the only country where camel population has gone down for many reasons. And here I bring the women amongst the camel breeders in Rajasthan to the center. The camel in this area of Rajasthan feeds on 36 herbals, and their pastures are going, the mining, and many, many more reasons. So, one of the things is that COVID has taught us about health tourism. This is money. This is a lot of money. It's more than the tiger, it's more than anything else. Health tourism, the camel milk tourism, and the camel breeders' festivals. And it creates that immersion into the landscape and brings India alive for you. When I think about all the experiences I have had, the YPO is a very special chapter that I bring in. And this, I do corporate retreats, for example, in Ajanta Ellora, and I take them inside and outside, into the chaos and outside, bring them the template of this ancient trade route in the ancient times. And of course, I'm a classical dancer too, and a practicing one. I do perform India. So maybe it's the monsoon, and I look at the clouds and the lightning, and I dance like the peacock, the national bird of India. And you make people live a dream to engage with this incredible idea called India. And you give them dreams for money, for good health, for fulfilling your inside and outside, for spirituality that does not only get limited to one religion. India comes alive in these various stories that are untold. The stories of women, the stories of tradition bearers who've carried India on their shoulder. When you go into a forest for a wildlife tour, it's not only limited to tigers, it's limited also to those forest dwellers who've engaged with the forest reserves in such an innovative way. We need to reinvent. With climate change happening now, this is about sustainability. This is about responsibility as a global citizen. And this is about engaging and partnering with India, the geopolitics, and also organically making the world reinvent itself after COVID. This is the story of performing heritage. Thank you, these DLC talks. I hope you continue enjoying them. With me, Navina Jafa, signing off.